I arrived at my son David's house for Christmas dinner carrying the same apple pie I'd been making for 40 years. The sweet scent of cinnamon filled the entrance as I walked toward my usual seat at the dining table. Then David roughly pushed me aside, and I fell hard onto the floor. "This seat belongs to my father-in-law now. You need to sit in the kitchen," he announced coldly while his wife Brittany smirked. The entire family watched in shocked silence. I realized this was the moment everything must change. The pain in my hip from hitting the hardwood floor was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. As I struggled to process what had just happened, my mind raced back through the past 3 years since David married Brittany. How had my loving son become this cold stranger who would physically push his 65-year-old mother to the ground? David and I had always been close. After his father died when David was 15, we became a team. I worked double shifts at the hospital as a registered nurse to put him through college. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I watched him graduate with honors, when he landed his first job as an engineer, when he married Jennifer and gave me my beautiful grandchildren, Emma and little Thomas. But that marriage ended 7 years ago, and David struggled as a single father with weekend custody. Then Brittany appeared like an answer to his prayers. She was 32, attractive, and seemingly devoted to David. At first, I was thrilled. She attended family dinners, complimented my cooking, and appeared to care about Emma and Thomas, then 13 and 8. The changes started slowly. First, Brittany suggested David skip Sunday dinners because they needed couple time. Then she convinced him his children should spend less time at his house because they needed stability with their mother. Family gatherings became less frequent. Phone calls grew shorter. Brittany always had reasonable explanations, delivered with such sweetness that questioning her felt petty. When David lost his job during corporate downsizing 18 months ago, I didn't hesitate to help. I took out a second mortgage on my house, the same house where Id raised David, where his father had built the back deck with his own hands. $70,000 to help them stay afloat while David job searched. Brittany cried grateful tears, calling me the mother shed never had. Her own parents lived in Florida, she said, barely scraping by on Social Security. Yet here they were now, these supposedly poor parents, sitting in my chair at the Christmas table like royalty. Brittany's father, a heavy-set man named Frank with cold eyes, lounged in my spot while her mother Patricia picked at the turkey with manicured nails that certainly didn't look like they belonged to someone struggling financially. As family members finally moved to help me up, I felt a small hand slip something into my pocket. Emma, now 16 and brave beyond her years, whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "Grandma, you need to see what's on this. She doesn't know I have it. Look at it tonight, please." I felt the small flash drive in my pocket, no bigger than my thumbnail. Emma's eyes were urgent, pleading. But before I could respond, Brittany's sharp voice cut through the room. "Emma, stop bothering your grandmother. Can't you see she's confused? David, I told you we should have prepared everyone. Your mother's been having these episodes. Remember last month when she forgot Shed already paid her electric bill twice?" I hadn't forgotten anything. I'd never paid any bill twice, but I saw David nod slowly, his face a mixture of concern and something else. Was it guilt? Or was he truly convinced I was losing my mind? "Mom, maybe you should rest in the guest room," David said, not meeting my eyes. "Well, bring you a plate." "I'm fine," I said, standing with as much dignity as I could muster. "But I think I'll go home." "Don't be dramatic, Ashley," Brittany said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We're family. These little misunderstandings happen. Frank and Patricia have come all the way from Florida just to meet you properly. They've heard so much about David's mother." Frank stood then, extending his hand with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Pleasure to finally meet the woman who raised such a successful son. Brittany tells us you've been so generous with your support." Something about the way he said generous made my skin crawl. I shook his hand briefly, noting the expensive watch on his wrist, the kind my late husband had always dreamed of buying but never could afford. These weren't people struggling on Social Security. "I need to use the restroom," I said, extracting myself from the conversation. But instead of the guest bathroom, I headed to the kitchen, needing a moment to think. Through the doorway, I could hear the dining room conversation resume, laughter filling the space as if nothing had happened. As if pushing an elderly mother to the ground was just another Thursday. That's when I heard Brittany on the phone in the hallway, speaking in a low, urgent tone. She must have thought I'd gone to the upstairs bathroom. I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, straining to hear. "Yes, it's going perfectly," she said. The confusion about the bills, the repeated stories, and now this outburst at dinner. Everyone saw her lose her balance and fall. David's completely convinced she's deteriorating. The papers should be ready by New Year's, right? My blood ran cold. Papers? What papers? Good. Once we have power of attorney, we can move forward with selling her house. She won't even realize what's happening until it's too late. The nursing home is already selected. Meadowbrook Care, the one with the locked memory unit. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, my mind reeling from what I'd just overheard. Brittany continued her conversation, each word another dagger in my heart. David's already signed the preliminary papers as next of kin. He thinks his being a caring son, planning for his mother's future. The idiot actually believes she's showing signs of dementia. "Those pills you gave me work perfectly. Just a little in her coffee when she visits, and she's confused for hours." Pills? I thought back to the times I'd visited David and Brittany's house over the past 6 months. The dizzy spells afterward. The confusion that would hit me on the drive home, forcing me to pull over. The time I'd arrived at the grocery store with no memory of why I'd gone there. I'd been terrified, secretly Googling early onset dementia symptoms, too afraid to tell anyone. "No, she has no other family," Brittany continued. "David's an only child. Father's dead. The house is worth at least $450,000 in this market, and she owns it outright. Plus, there's the life insurance, retirement accounts, and that savings account David mentioned. We're looking at close to $700,000 total." I heard footsteps approaching and quickly turned on the faucet, pretending to wash my hands. David appeared in the doorway, his face still wearing that foreign, cold expression. "Mom, you're being rude to our guests. Brittany's parents are trying to make conversation, and you're hiding in the kitchen." I looked at my son, searching for any trace of the boy I'd raised. "David, when did I ever pay my electric bill twice?" He sighed heavily. "Mom, it was 3 weeks ago. The utility company called me because they were concerned. This is exactly what we're talking about. You don't remember things." "They called you? Why would they call you instead of me?" "Because I'm listed as your emergency contact. Remember? You added me last year." I hadn't added anyone to my utility accounts. Another lie, but I could see in David's eyes that he believed it. My son, my intelligent, logical son, had been completely manipulated. "I'm going home," I said quietly. "Let me drive you. You seem upset." "No." I moved past him, through the dining room where everyone avoided eye contact, and grabbed my coat. Emma caught my eye once more, touching her pocket meaningfully. The flash drive. Whatever was on it, Shed risked a lot to give it to me. The 20-minute drive home felt like hours. I kept checking my mirrors, paranoid that someone might be following me. When I finally pulled into my garage, I sat in the car for a moment, gathering strength for what came next. Inside, I went straight to my laptop. The flash drive contained dozens of audio files, all dated over the past 4 months. I clicked on the first one, and Emma's young voice filled my quiet living room. Recording number 1, September 15th. "I'm making these because no one will believe me without proof. My stepmother Brittany is planning something terrible, and I need evidence." The next voice was Brittany's, crystal clear. "Frank, the old bat came by again today." I put twice the normal dose in her coffee. "David actually called me afterward, worried because she seemed so out of it when she left. Has starting to document everything like you said." Frank's gravelly voice responded. "Good. We need at least 6 documented incidents before we can file for guardianship. How's the financial inventory coming?" "I've got access to most of it." "She's got more than we thought." "There's a CD worth $50,000 that matures next month, and she's got a Roth IRA David didn't even know about. My hands shook as I clicked through more files. Emma had been brilliant, leaving her phone recording in various rooms when Brittany thought she was at school or in her bedroom. The conversations painted a horrifying picture. In one recording from early October, Brittany spoke to someone named Patricia, though not the woman posing as her mother. The Colorado situation has cooled down. They ruled Harold's death accidental. His mother's testimony was dismissed because of her dementia. Same playbooks working perfectly here. Harold? Colorado? I grabbed a pen and started taking notes. Another recording from November made my stomach turn. I'm increasing the dosage gradually. Too much at once might trigger a medical examination. We need her competent enough to sign the papers but confused enough that she won't understand them. The sweet spot is tricky. Then I heard my own voice in the background of one recording, talking to David about Thanksgiving plans. I sounded slurred, confused, struggling to form coherent sentences. That was the day Id had 2 cups of coffee at their house, insisting I was fine to drive home despite David's concerns. Had followed me home that day, deeply worried. Now I understood why. The last recording was from just 2 days ago. Emma's voice was urgent. I'm going to give these to Grandma at Christmas. I heard Brittany say something about New Year's and papers. I think they're going to do something soon. If something happens to me or Grandma, please check my cloud backup. Password is Grandma Ashley 1958, my birth year. This brave child had thought of everything. I played one more file. This one from earlier today. Just hours before dinner, Brittany was coaching David. When your mom gets here, she might make a scene about the seating. Last time she was confused about where to sit, remember? If she gets upset, that's just more proof she's not thinking clearly. My parents will witness everything. I don't want to hurt her, David's voice said, sounding conflicted. You're not hurting her, baby. You're helping her. Once we have guardianship, we can make sure she gets the care she needs. Otherwise, she might hurt herself or someone else. Remember how she almost caused that accident last month? What accident? Then I remembered. It swerved to avoid a dog that ran into the street. Perfectly normal reaction. But David had been following me home again after another drugged coffee visit. To him, it must have looked like erratic driving. You're right, David said in the recording. I just wish there was another way. Sometimes we have to make hard choices for the people we love. Brittany cooed. Your mom will thank you once she's getting proper care. The recording ended with the sound of a kiss, and I had to run to the bathroom to be sick. My son truly believed he was helping me. The betrayal was somehow worse knowing he thought he was doing the right thing, that his cruelty came from manipulated love rather than genuine malice. I returned to my laptop and began searching for information about Harold in Colorado. It didn't take long to find the obituary. Harold Brennan, age 58, died in a hiking accident 14 months ago. Survived by his wife Bethany Brennan and his mother, Dorothy Brennan. There was a photo. And even though Shed changed her hair color and style, I recognized Brittany's sharp features immediately. Bethany. Brittany. How had no one made that connection? I dug deeper, finding a small article about the estate dispute that followed. Dorothy Brennan had contested the will, claiming her daughter-in-law had manipulated her son. Shed insisted Harold would never have cut her out completely, never have left everything to a woman had known less than 2 years. But Dorothy had been diagnosed with dementia shortly after her son's death, and her testimony was deemed unreliable. The parallels were terrifying. I spent the next 3 hours diving deep into research, my nurse's training in detailed documentation serving me well. Every piece of information I found added another layer to the nightmare. Harold Brennan had been a widower with no children when he met Bethany at a grief support group. His first wife had died of cancer, leaving him with substantial life insurance and a paid-off house in Denver. Within 6 months, Head married Bethany. Within 18 months, he was dead, having fallen from a hiking trail Head traveled hundreds of times before. The local newspaper had covered the story briefly. Harold's mother Dorothy had tried to get anyone to listen. Shed hired a lawyer with her Social Security money, but Bethany had produced documents showing Dorothy's diagnosis of dementia, medical records that Dorothy swore were fabricated. The case went nowhere. I found Dorothy's phone number in an online directory. My hands trembled as I dialed, not even sure she'd still be at the same facility the obituary had mentioned. But after several transfers, a fragile voice answered. "Dorothy Brennan? My name is Ashley. You don't know me, but I think the woman who married your son is now married to mine." There was a long silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Bethany. She goes by Brittany now. Brittany Marshall. But I found 3 different last names she'd used before. She's been married at least 4 times that I could track. 2 husbands died. One in Florida, one in Arizona. Both left everything to her. The third divorced her and fled the country, changed his name. I found him through a private investigator, but he was too scared to testify. Dorothy, would you be willing to speak to the police again? If I could prove she's doing the same thing here. I'll do anything, but sweetheart, you need to be careful." Harold started getting sick right after he confronted her about some inconsistencies in her story. The doctors said it was a heart condition, but had just had a clean cardiac workup 3 months prior. Then came the hiking accident. She paused. They found a strange substance in his system during the autopsy, but it was ruled inconclusive. The coroner said it could have been from any supplement. After we hung up, I called Emma's cell phone. She answered on the first ring, whispering, "Grandma, did you listen to them?" "Every one." "Emma, you brave girl. Where are you now?" "In my room at Mom's house. Dad's weekend doesn't start until tomorrow, but I told Mom I felt sick at dinner, so she let me leave early." "Grandma, there's more. Check your email. I just sent you something." I opened my email to find dozens of forwarded messages from Brittany's account. "Emma, how did you—" She keeps her passwords written in her planner. She thinks she's so careful. But she forgets I do homework at Dad's desk sometimes. I took pictures of everything. The emails were damning. Conversations with someone named Marcus, who appeared to be a document forger, discussing power of attorney papers, medical records, and something called a competency evaluation that was already filled out, just waiting for signatures. There were emails to Meadowbrook Care Facility, inquiring about their memory care unit and discussing private pay rates using my assets. One email thread with Frank particularly chilled me. "The Christmas push is perfect. Multiple witnesses to unstable behavior. Make sure Patricia plays the concerned fellow senior citizen. David's primed to believe anything after the driving incidents." Frank had replied, "Just like Phoenix, Richard's family ate it up when Mom seemed confused at Thanksgiving. He signed everything by Christmas, had her committed by New Year's. Still sends us Christmas cards thanking us for helping him through such a difficult time." Phoenix, another victim. The scale of their operation was staggering. Emma had also photographed pages from Brittany's planner. Lists of my assets, my daily routines, my medications. There were notes about increasing dosages, observations about my reactions. 2 pills make her disoriented for 3 hours. 3 pills cause memory gaps. 4 might be too much, could trigger hospital visit. Stay at 3. "Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've saved my life. Grandma, there's one more thing. Dad's not bad. Hes sick too. I've seen Brittany putting something in his food. Not the same stuff she gives you, something else. Has been different. Meaner, more paranoid, quicker to anger. That's not my dad." My heart broke all over again. My poor David, my sweet boy, being poisoned by the woman he loved, turned into a weapon against his own mother. "Emma, I need you to stay safe. Don't let them know you know anything. Can you do that?" "Yes. But Grandma, you have to stop them. Dad showed me some papers yesterday. Hes planning to sign something on December 27th. He thinks he's being responsible, taking care of you." December 27th, 3 days away. After we hung up, I made a decision. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. But who would believe such an elaborate story? Then I remembered something Dorothy had mentioned, a private investigator who'd helped her, even though it had been too late. Someone who specialized in elder fraud and con artists. I found his website easily enough, Jack Morrison, former FBI financial crimes investigator, now private consultant. His after-hours number went to voicemail, but I left a detailed message mentioning Dorothy Brennan and Bethany Carlisle. Within 10 minutes, my phone rang. Mrs. Ashley, this is Jack Morrison. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to call me about Bethany Carlisle. How quickly can you get somewhere safe? Because if she's following her pattern, you don't have much time. I'm at my house now. Should I leave? No, that might trigger suspicion. But don't eat or drink anything you didn't prepare yourself, and don't let anyone in. I can be there by morning. What city are you in? When I told him I was only 3 hours from his office in Chicago, he corrected himself. He'll be there tonight, midnight. Text me your address. And Mrs. Ashley? You did the right thing calling me. We're going to stop them this time. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, looking around at the home I'd shared with my husband, where I'd raised David, where I'd rebuilt my life after becoming a widow. The Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, covered with ornaments David had made in elementary school. Had it really only been 5 hours since I'd walked into his house with my apple pie, hoping for a normal family Christmas? I thought about the flash drive Emma had risked so much to give me. A 16-year-old girl had seen what all the adults had missed. She'd gathered evidence like a seasoned detective, protecting both her grandmother and her father with a courage that humbled me. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Mom, I'm worried about you. The way you left dinner wasn't like you. Brittany thinks we should come check on you. We can bring you some leftover turkey. I stared at the message, my heart aching. My son was worried about me, but his concern was being weaponized against us both. How many other families had these monsters destroyed? How many sons and daughters had been turned against their parents, believing they were helping when they were actually enabling a crime? I texted back, I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Enjoy your evening with Brittany's parents. I love you. He responded immediately. Love you too, Mom. Well, talk tomorrow about getting you some help. Brittany found a great doctor who specializes in geriatric care. I'll bet she did. At exactly midnight, headlights swept across my living room window. I watched Jack Morrison exit a dark sedan, his movements careful and professional. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 40s, with sharp eyes that took in everything as he approached my door. Mrs. Ashley, he said when I let him in, showing me his identification. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I'm glad Emma had the presence of mind to document everything. I led him to my kitchen table where I'd laid out all the evidence in organized piles. Jack's eyes widened as he took in the volume of material. This is more than Dorothy and I ever had, he said, immediately beginning to photograph everything with a specialized camera. Your granddaughter is remarkable. She gets her courage from her mother, actually, I said, which surprised me to admit. Jennifer, David's ex-wife. I should call her. Jack looked up sharply. The ex-wife? Yes, definitely call her. In my experience, ex-spouses often have pieces of the puzzle we need. It was late, but Jennifer answered immediately. Ashley? Is everything okay? Emma texted me something about dinner going badly. Jennifer, I need you to listen carefully and please believe what I'm about to tell you. 20 minutes later, after I'd explained everything, Jennifer was silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she spoke, her voice steel. I knew it. I knew something was off about her. Ashley, I have something to tell you. 3 months before Brittany supposedly met David at that coffee shop, she approached me at Thomas' soccer practice. My blood ran cold. What? She struck up a conversation, seemed friendly, asked about single parenting, mentioned she was new to town. Then she asked if I knew any good places to meet people. I actually mentioned that coffee shop where David always goes on Saturday mornings. I even described him, pointed him out when he came to pick up the kids. Jennifer's voice cracked. I basically handed him to her. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. There's more. After they started dating, I did some digging. Call it ex-wife intuition. I found a Brittany Marshall on social media, but the profiles only went back 2 years. Everything before that was scrubbed clean. When I mentioned it to David, he said Shed had a stalker ex and had to delete everything for safety. Jack leaned forward. Mrs. Jennifer, would you be willing to sign an affidavit about that initial meeting? I'll do anything. David's not perfect, but he's a good father. If she's drugging him, God, it explains so much. His personality changes, the anger issues. Emma's been saying for months that Dad isn't acting like himself. We agreed to meet first thing in the morning. After Jennifer hung up, Jack pulled out his laptop. Now, let me show you what I've compiled over the past 2 years. He turned the screen toward me. Bethany Carlisle, also known as Brittany Marshall, Bella Carver, and at least 3 other aliases. Her real name, as far as I can determine, is Barbara Collins. She's 41 years old, originally from Nevada. Her accomplices, Frank and Patricia, are actually Franklin Torres and Patricia Vance. They're not married. They're professionals who've been running this con for at least 8 years. The screen showed a complex web of connections, victims, and timelines. 6 confirmed victims that I've tracked. Total stolen assets, approximately $4.3 million. Your son would be number 7. Why haven't they been caught? Because they're smart. They space out their crimes, never hit the same state twice in a row, and they're masters at making their victims look mentally incompetent. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, the paper trail shows a concerned family member caring for a declining elderly relative. It looks legitimate on the surface, but Dorothy knew. But by then, they'd laid the groundwork too well. Her son had been documenting her confusion for months, just like David's been documenting yours. He pulled up another document. I've been in touch with 2 other families. Both are willing to testify if we can get law enforcement to listen. My phone buzzed. Emma was texting from her mother's bathroom, where Shed gone to hide. Grandma, something's happening. Dad just showed up here at Mom's house. It's 1 a.m. He looks really sick. Hes saying crazy things about you being in danger and needing to sign papers tonight to protect your assets. Mom's not letting him in. But he won't leave. I showed Jack the text. He immediately stood. This could be our chance. If he's acting erratically enough, we might be able to get him tested for substances tonight. Can you call Jennifer and tell her to call the police for a wellness check? While I called Jennifer, Jack made his own calls. Within minutes, he had contacted a detective he knew in the state police, who specialized in elder fraud. Then he called a toxicologist colleague who agreed to meet us at the hospital if we could get David there. Jennifer texted, "Police are here. David's really agitated. They're taking him to Street Mary's for evaluation. I'm following with Emma." Jack and I drove to Street Mary's in his car, my hands shaking the entire way. This was my son we were talking about. My boy who was as much a victim as I was. The emergency room was chaos, but Jennifer found us immediately. They're running tests. He kept saying Brittany told him you were going to be robbed tonight, that he needed to protect you by getting power of attorney immediately. The police officers said he seemed impaired. Emma ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. "Grandma, I was so scared. That wasn't Dad." His eyes looked wrong. A doctor approached us. "Are you David's family?" "I'm his mother," I said. "We've run preliminary tests. There are several unusual substances in his system. We're going to need to run more comprehensive panels, but this appears to be a case of poisoning. We're involving the police." Jack stepped forward, showing his credentials. "Doctor, I'm a private investigator specializing in elder fraud. We have reason to believe this man has been systematically drugged as part of an elaborate financial crime. We have evidence his wife has been drugging both him and his mother." The doctor's expression changed immediately. "I'll notify hospital security and make sure no one on his emergency contact list is allowed access. Well, need to keep him for observation and detox." Just then, my phone rang. Brittany's name appeared on the screen. Jack nodded for me to answer while he recorded. "Ashley, where is David?" Her voice was frantic. "He left the house in a terrible state. I'm so worried." "Hes safe," I said carefully. "Thank God." "Where is he?" "I'll come right away." "Brittany, I know everything. Silence. Then her voice changed, becoming cold and calculated. I don't know what you think you know, but David's documented your mental decline extensively. No one will believe a confused old woman over a concerned son and his wife. They'll believe Emma's recordings. They'll believe the emails to Marcus about the forged documents. They'll believe Dorothy Brennan and the families from Phoenix and Florida. The line went dead. Jack immediately called his police contact. They're going to run. We need units at David's house now. But by the time police arrived 40 minutes later, Brittany, Frank, and Patricia were gone. They'd left so quickly that dinner dishes were still on the table. What they didn't know was that Jack had anticipated this. Had placed a GPS tracker on their car while we were at the hospital, a precaution Head learned from years of chasing con artists. Let them run, he said with grim satisfaction. They always run to the next mark. Franklin Torres has a storage unit in Indianapolis where he keeps their documents and alternate identities. I've been monitoring it for 6 months, waiting for enough evidence to move. Thanks to Emma's recordings and your documentation, we finally have it. The next 36 hours blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. While Brittany and her accomplices fled, thinking they'd escaped once again, Jack coordinated with law enforcement across 3 states. The GPS tracker showed them heading toward Indianapolis, exactly as Head predicted. I spent those hours at David's bedside as the drugs slowly left his system. The toxicologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, explained what they'd found. Your son had therapeutic levels of 3 different psychiatric medications in his system, none of which he was prescribed. One increases aggression, another causes paranoid thinking, and the third creates a kind of emotional numbness. Together, they would make someone highly susceptible to suggestion while also increasing hostile behavior. David slept for nearly 14 hours. When he finally woke, his eyes were clear for the first time in months. Mom, he said, his voice small and confused. What happened? Why am I in the hospital? The next hour was one of the hardest of my life. Jennifer, Emma, and I sat with David as Detective Maria Santos explained everything. She played Emma's recordings, showed him the emails, laid out the evidence piece by piece. I watched my son's face crumble as he realized the truth. I pushed you, he whispered, looking at me with horror. At Christmas dinner, I pushed my own mother to the ground. He started to sob, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs I hadn't seen since he was a little boy. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I held him while he cried. This grown man, who was still my baby. You weren't yourself. She poisoned you, David. This isn't your fault. Emma climbed onto the hospital bed, curling against her father's side. I knew it wasn't you, Dad. The real you would never hurt Grandma. Jennifer, who had every reason to keep her distance, sat on David's other side. We're going to get through this together, she said. All of us. Detective Santos' phone buzzed. She stepped away to take the call, then returned with a grim smile. They've been arrested in Indianapolis. They were at the storage unit, loading up false documents and cash. The FBI is now involved due to the interstate nature of the crimes. But the revelations were far from over. Jack arrived at the hospital with bankers' boxes full of documents retrieved from the storage unit. You need to see this, he told me privately. It's worse than we thought. The storage unit had contained records of 12 victims over 8 years, not the 6 Jack had tracked. The total theft amount exceeded $7 million. There were detailed plans for future targets, including 2 other families in our city that Brittany had already begun researching. She kept trophies, Jack said, showing me a photograph album Brittany had maintained. Pictures of her with each victim family, smiling at dinners, holidays, hospital beds where Shed watched them die or be committed. My family's Christmas photo from last year was already pasted inside, with notes about our assets written in the margins. One photo particularly chilled me. Harold Brennan on a hiking trail, Brittany beside him, Franklin visible in the background near a cliff edge. The photo was dated the day before Harold's death. Jack also found medical supplies in the storage unit, including vials of the drugs used on David and me. purchased illegally from overseas pharmacies. There were detailed dosing charts for different effects, like some kind of sick cookbook for human manipulation. That evening, while David was being interviewed by the FBI, I did something I'd been dreading. I called each of my friends and extended family members who'd been at Christmas dinner. Each conversation was painful, explaining how they'd been unwitting participants in an elaborate crime. My sister-in-law, Carol, cried when she realized Shed watched me be pushed and done nothing. We thought David knew best, she said. Brittany had been telling us for months about your confusion. We saw what we expected to see. It was a harsh lesson in how easily perception could be manipulated. Meanwhile, Jennifer worked with Jack to trace Brittany's infiltration into our lives. They discovered Shed researched our family for 3 months before making contact. Shed known about David's divorce, his schedule, his vulnerabilities. Shed even volunteered at the senior center I attended, though I'd never noticed her there, gathering information about my routines and relationships. On December 27th, the day David was supposed to sign the guardianship papers, we instead sat in a federal prosecutor's office giving depositions. David was still weak from his ordeal, but his determination to see justice done was fierce. I want to testify, he told the prosecutor. I want every family to know how these people operate, how they turn love into a weapon. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Rebecca Thompson, had news for us. Barbara Collins, aka Brittany Marshall, has been on our radar for 3 years, but we've never had enough evidence until now. Your family's documentation, especially Emma's recordings, gives us what we need for federal racketeering charges. What about the other families? I asked. We're contacting all known victims. Dorothy Brennan is flying in from Colorado tomorrow. She's waited 2 years to see justice for her son. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, touching familiar objects, grounding myself in reality after months of manufactured confusion. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, a reminder of how quickly life could shatter and reshape itself. My phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Jack. Ashley, I'm sorry to call so late, but you need to know. Franklin Torres is trying to make a deal. He's offering information about other members of their network in exchange for a reduced sentence. Network. This is bigger than just 3 people. They're part of a loose organization that shares tactics, documents, and targets. Franklin's willing to name names. The scale of the betrayal kept expanding. How many families across the country were spending this holiday season in manufactured chaos, not knowing they were victims of an organized crime ring? I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where my husband had once helped David with homework, where Wed celebrated birthdays and grieved losses. In a strange way, I felt grateful. Unlike Harold Brennan and others, I was alive. My son was alive. We had the chance to heal. As dawn broke, I saw a car pull into my driveway. David, Jennifer, Emma, and Thomas got out together. My son was walking slowly, still recovering, but his head was high. They came in without knocking, like family should. We couldn't sleep either, Jennifer said. Figured we might as well be together. Emma had brought her laptop. Grandma, I've been researching. There are support groups for families who've been victims of elder fraud. There's one that meets in person not far from here. Thomas, quiet until now, spoke up. Dad told us everything in an age-appropriate way, he said, using air quotes around the phrase. Just so you know, Grandma, I never liked her. She smiled too much with her mouth but not her eyes. Children see things adults miss, I thought. David sat beside me, taking my hand. Mom, I've been thinking. After this is over, after the trial, I want to do something. Maybe start a foundation or awareness campaign. This happened to us because nobody talks about it. The shame keeps families silent, and that's what predators like Brittany count on. 3 days before New Year's Eve, we received word that Brittany, Franklin, and Patricia would be transported to our local federal courthouse for their arraignment. The prosecutor warned us we didn't have to attend, but I knew I needed to face them one more time. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread through local media about the case, and several other families who'd experienced elder fraud had come to show support. Dorothy Brennan sat in the front row with me. This 78-year-old woman who'd flown from Colorado despite her fear of flying because, as she said, "I need to see the witch who killed my boy face justice." When the defendants were brought in, I barely recognized Brittany. Gone was the polished suburban wife. Her hair hung limp, her designer clothes replaced with a gray detention uniform, but her eyes remained cold and calculating as they swept the courtroom, landing on me with naked hatred. Franklin Torres looked smaller without his expensive suit and false charm. Patricia Vance kept her head down, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. They looked like what they were: common criminals stripped of their disguises. The prosecutor read the charges: federal racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, elder abuse, and 47 other counts. The murder charges related to Harold Brennan and 2 other victims whose deaths were being reinvestigated. When asked how they pleaded, all 3 responded not guilty through their attorneys. Then something unexpected happened. David stood up in the gallery. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge, an elderly woman named Patricia Hayes, looked surprised but nodded. "This is just an arraignment, not a trial, but given the nature of the charges, I'll allow a brief statement." David's voice was steady and clear. "That woman," he pointed at Brittany, "poisoned me with psychiatric drugs to turn me into a weapon against my own mother. She made me believe my mom was losing her mind. She made me push my 65-year-old mother to the ground at Christmas dinner. I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." He turned to look at Brittany directly. "But what you didn't count on was my daughter, a 16-year-old girl who was smarter, braver, and more observant than all of us adults combined. You thought you'd isolated us, but family isn't that easy to destroy. Real family fights for each other, even when they're being torn apart." Brittany's composure cracked. She started to speak, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, silencing her. David continued, "I'm not just here as a victim. I'm here as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can prey on families, turn our love against us, and steal our parents' dignity along with their assets. We're not going to be silent anymore." When David sat down, Emma squeezed his hand. Jennifer wiped away tears. Even Detective Santos looked moved. The judge denied bail for all 3 defendants, citing them as flight risks and dangers to the community. As they were led away, Brittany turned back one more time. Our eyes met, and I saw something I didn't expect: fear. She knew her game was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I hadn't planned to speak, but found myself in front of the microphones. "Elder fraud is a silent epidemic," I said. "These criminals count on our shame, our isolation, and our reluctance to admit we've been fooled. But there's no shame in being deceived by professional con artists. The only shame is in letting them continue." That evening, my phone rang constantly. Families from across the country who'd seen the news coverage called to share their own stories. A woman from Texas said her mother had died in a nursing home after her boyfriend convinced the family she had dementia. A man from Oregon described losing his father's entire estate to a woman who'd claimed to be a home health aide. Jack Morrison arrived at my house with a proposal. The FBI wants to create a task force specifically for these types of crimes. They've asked me to consult, and they want you and David to be part of an awareness campaign. "Mom should do it," David said immediately. "She's the one who stayed strong when everything was falling apart." But I shook my head. "We do it together. All of us. Jennifer, Emma, even Thomas. This affected our entire family." Over the next few days, we learned more about the investigations, findings. The storage unit revealed Franklin Torres had been the mastermind, having run similar cons for 20 years under various identities. Head recruited Patricia and Brittany separately, training them in what he called the art of family infiltration. There was a manual, actually written like a business guide, detailing how to identify targets, establish trust, create confusion, and ultimately gain control. One chapter was titled "Turning Love into Compliance," and reading it made me physically ill. The manual explained their victim selection process. Widowed or divorced middle-aged men with elderly parents who owned property. Adult children with strained relationships were ideal because the new spouse could position herself as a bridge builder while actually widening the gap. Emma made a disturbing discovery while reviewing the evidence with Jack. She found photos on Brittany's phone from 6 months before she met David, showing our house from various angles, pictures of me at the grocery store, even shots of David's apartment building. The stalking had been extensive and meticulous. "Look at this," Emma said, showing me a note in Brittany's handwriting. Target's mother, Ashley, 65, widowed. Nurse, retired. Owns home outright, value estimated $400,000. Close relationship with son is primary obstacle. Create distance through chemical intervention and gaslighting. Timeline: 18 months to guardianship. It'd been reduced to a mathematical equation. My life valued only in dollars and obstacles. The prosecutor called with updates regularly. More victims were coming forward from states we hadn't even connected to the crime ring. A judge in Arizona had been removed from the bench after it was discovered had been taking bribes to approve guardianships. A doctor in Nevada lost his license for providing false dementia diagnoses. The network was unraveling like a pulled thread. But the most shocking revelation came from Dorothy Brennan. Shed hired her own investigator after Harold's death and discovered something crucial. Brittany had a son, a 20-year-old college student named Marcus who'd been raised by his paternal grandparents after Brittany abandoned him as an infant. He'd reached out to Dorothy after seeing the news coverage. "He wants to testify," Dorothy told me over the phone. "He says his mother tried to reconnect with him 2 years ago. Wanted him to join what she called the family business. When he refused, she threatened him. Has been in hiding ever since." The web of victims and witnesses kept expanding. Each person who came forward added another piece to the puzzle, revealing an organized crime syndicate that had operated for 2 decades, destroying families for profit while hiding behind the facade of concerned caregiving. On New Year's Eve, instead of celebrating, our family gathered at my house for a different kind of marking of time. David had been sober from the drugs for a week and was starting therapy to deal with the trauma. The therapist had warned us that recovery wouldn't be linear, that David would have good days and bad days as he processed what had been done to him and what had been manipulated into doing. "I keep replaying Christmas dinner," David said as we sat around my living room. "I can see myself pushing you, Mom, but it feels like watching someone else. The anger I felt, it wasn't mine, but I experienced it. How do I reconcile that?" Jennifer, who'd been remarkable through all of this, spoke up. "You don't reconcile it. You accept that you were violated in one of the worst ways possible. Someone chemically altered your brain without your consent. You're not responsible for what you did under that influence, but you are responsible for your recovery and making sure it never happens again." Emma had been quieter than usual all evening. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking about the other kids. Brittany mentioned in one of the recordings that Marcus wasn't the only child Shed left behind. How many kids are out there with mothers or fathers who are these kinds of predators? How many are too scared to speak up?" It was a sobering thought. The ripples of damage spread far beyond the immediate victims. As midnight approached, I stood and raised a glass of sparkling cider. This year nearly broke us. We were betrayed, poisoned, manipulated, and turned against each other. But we survived. We're still here, still a family, and we're going to make sure no other family goes through this alone. "To survival," David said, raising his glass. "To justice," Dorothy added, having joined us for the evening. "To family," Emma concluded. "The real kind, not the manufactured kind." As fireworks exploded over the city, I thought about the journey ahead. There would be a trial, testimony, and media attention. There would be good days and setbacks. But for the first time in months, I wasn't confused. I wasn't doubting myself. I knew exactly who I was, a mother who'd fought for her son, a grandmother who'd been saved by her granddaughter's courage, and a survivor who would not be silenced. The next morning, January 1st, David woke to 38 missed calls. But this time they weren't about frozen accounts or arrests. They were from families across the country, thanking him for his courage in speaking out, organizations wanting to partner on awareness campaigns, journalists wanting to tell our story to help others. He looked at his phone, then at me. Ready for this, Mom. I thought about all the families spending New Year's Day in confusion and fear, not knowing they were being systematically destroyed from within. More than ready. Let's do this. 6 months later, the federal courthouse was once again packed, but this time for the verdict. The trial had lasted 3 weeks, with testimony from 43 witnesses across 12 states. It testified for 6 hours, detailing every moment of confusion, every doctored coffee, every manipulated family gathering. David's testimony had been the most powerful. Head stood in front of the jury, describing the sensation of losing himself to pharmaceutical manipulation, the horror of remembering pushing his mother while being unable to stop himself, the gradual realization that the woman he loved had been slowly poisoning him. Imagine, Head said to the jury, that someone you trust completely is feeding you substances that change your very personality. You become angry at people you love. You believe lies that contradict everything you know to be true. You watch yourself destroy your most important relationships and feel justified doing it. That's what Brittany Marshall did to me. She didn't just steal money. She stole my mind, my agency, my relationship with my mother. Emma had testified via closed-circuit television to protect her privacy as a minor. Her clear, precise recounting of gathering evidence had several jury members in tears. I knew something was wrong when Dad started forgetting things about us, Shed said. Like how I'm allergic to strawberries, or that Thomas plays soccer, not baseball. Those weren't things my dad would forget unless something was really wrong with his brain. Dorothy Brennan had flown in from Colorado to testify about her son Harold. Marcus, Brittany's abandoned son, had provided crucial testimony about his mother's attempts to recruit him into the criminal enterprise. Even Jennifer had testified, describing how Brittany had gathered intelligence months before accidentally meeting David. The defense had tried various strategies. They claimed entrapment, suggested David and I were conspiring to avoid legitimate elder care, even implied Emma had fabricated the recordings. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the chemical analyses, the financial trails, the pattern of victims across multiple states, all of it painted an undeniable picture. When the jury returned after just 4 hours of deliberation, I knew. Guilty on all counts. Brittany received 40 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Franklin Torres got 50 years as the ringleader. Patricia Vance, who had cooperated with prosecutors and provided crucial information about other members of the network, received 25 years. As the sentences were read, Brittany stared straight ahead, no emotion on her face. But Franklin Torres broke down, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. Patricia Vance whispered "I'm sorry" to the gallery, though whether she meant it or was just playing another angle, I'd never know. Outside the courthouse, our family stood together as David read a prepared statement. Today, justice was served, not just for our family, but for the dozens of families these criminals destroyed. Elder fraud is not just a financial crime. It's a form of psychological torture that tears families apart from the inside. We hope this case sends a clear message. We will not be silent victims anymore. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, 3 states announced new task forces specifically targeting elder fraud. The AARP launched a campaign using our story to educate families about the warning signs. David and I were invited to testify before Congress about the need for stronger federal legislation protecting elderly Americans from financial exploitation. But the most meaningful responses came from individual families. Letters poured in from across the country. A daughter in Maine realized her stepfather was drugging her mother. A son in California discovered his wife had been slowly taking control of his father's assets. Each letter represented a family saved from the nightmare Wed endured. David threw himself into advocacy work. He started a nonprofit called Family First Defense, offering resources for families suspecting elder fraud. He partnered with Jack Morrison to create training programs for law enforcement, teaching them to recognize the signs of family infiltration crimes. The work became part of his healing process. Every family we help makes what happened to us mean something. He told me one evening as we reviewed case files together. It doesn't erase what I did, but maybe it balances the scales a little. Emma, now 17, had started speaking at high schools about recognizing manipulation in families. Teenagers see things adults miss. She would tell auditoriums full of students, "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your family, speak up. You might be the only one who can see clearly." Thomas, inspired by his sister's courage, had started a blog for kids dealing with family trauma. His simple, honest writing resonated with young people struggling to understand why their families had suddenly changed. Jennifer and David had grown closer through the ordeal, though they hadn't rekindled their romance. Instead, they'd formed something perhaps more valuable: a true partnership in raising their children and supporting our extended family. "We're better as friends," Jennifer told me, "but we're united in making sure the kids know they're loved and protected." 1 year after that horrible Christmas dinner, we gathered again at my house, the same table, the same apple pie, but everything else had changed. David sat in his usual seat, clear-eyed and present. Emma and Thomas flanked their father, while Jennifer sat beside me. Dorothy Brennan had flown in from Colorado, now part of our extended family forged through shared trauma and triumph. "I have something to say." David stood, his voice steady. "Last Christmas, I pushed my mother to the ground in this very room. I was under the influence of drugs I didn't know I was taking, manipulated by someone I thought loved me, but that doesn't change the fact that it happened." "Mom," he turned to me, "I know you've forgiven me, but I need to say this in front of everyone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every moment of pain, every second of doubt, every instance where I failed to protect you when you'd spent your whole life protecting me." I stood and embraced my son, feeling the solid, real presence of him. No longer the hostile stranger Brittany had tried to create. "You came back to me," I whispered. "That's all that matters." Emma raised her glass of cider. "I want to make a toast to all the families out there fighting silent battles, to the grandparents being isolated from their grandchildren, to the parents being convinced they're losing their minds, to the children who know something's wrong but don't know how to help. You're not alone. Speak up. Fight back. Family is stronger than any con artist's scheme." As we clinked glasses, I thought about the journey we'd taken. From that moment of falling on the floor, humiliated and discarded, to standing here surrounded by family who'd fought for each other against impossible odds. The scar tissue would always be there, but it had made us stronger, more vigilant, more appreciative of the bonds that truly mattered. 3 years have now passed since that Christmas. David has remarried, this time to a wonderful woman named Sarah, whom he met at a support group for victims of intimate partner abuse. They took things slowly, with full transparency and regular therapy. Sarah understood David's trauma because she'd experienced her own version of it with an ex-husband who'd gaslit her for years. Emma is in college now, studying criminal justice with a focus on elder law. She wants to become a prosecutor specializing in family fraud cases. "Grandma," she told me recently, "you showed me that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about protection, prevention, and giving people their voices back." Thomas, now 15, has become a peer counselor at his school, helping other kids navigate difficult family situations. His gentle wisdom, born from his own experience, has helped dozens of students recognize and report abuse in their homes. The nonprofit David started has helped investigate and prevent over 200 cases of elder fraud. We've testified before Congress 3 times, and finally, last month, the President signed into law the Family Protection Act, which increases penalties for elder fraud and provides federal funding for prevention programs. Dorothy Brennan and I speak regularly. She's become an activist in her own right, despite being 81 now. "Harold's death meant something," she tells me. "It led to stopping these monsters. He would be proud." Jack Morrison's investigation led to the arrest of 17 more members of the elder fraud network. The scope had been staggering: a loose confederation of criminals sharing tactics, documents, and target lists, operating in all 50 states. The bust made international news and led to similar investigations in Canada and the United Kingdom. But perhaps the most meaningful change has been in our daily lives. Our family dinners are regular and cherished. We've learned to spot manipulation in all its forms. We talk openly about drugs, consent, and the ways love can be weaponized. We're not paranoid, but we're prepared. Sometimes I think about Brittany in her federal prison cell. She's tried to appeal multiple times, each attempt failing. I received a letter from her once, claiming she'd been a victim too, that Franklin had controlled her. I threw it away unread by the end. Whether she was a victim once didn't matter. She'd chosen to become a perpetrator. The house where I raised David, where my husband built that back deck, where Brittany and Franklin had tried to steal everything, remains mine. But it's more than property now. It's a symbol of survival, of family bonds that couldn't be chemically dissolved or emotionally manipulated away. On quiet evenings, I sit on that back deck and think about the thousands of families still trapped in these schemes. According to the FBI, elder fraud costs Americans over $3 billion annually, but the emotional cost is immeasurable. Every dollar stolen represents a relationship destroyed, a family divided, a lifetime of trust shattered. That's why I keep telling this story, why David keeps speaking out, why Emma educates young people to trust their instincts. Every time we speak, someone reaches out afterward saying, "This is happening to my family," and we help them. We connect them with resources, investigators, and support groups. We walk them through the terrifying process of recognizing that someone they love is not who they pretend to be. The lesson I've learned, the one I share with every family facing this nightmare, is this. Love isn't just patient and kind. Sometimes love is fierce. Sometimes it's suspicious. Sometimes it demands proof and asks hard questions. Real love doesn't require you to ignore your instincts or sacrifice your safety. Real love doesn't push you to the ground and tell you it's for your own good. When someone tells you that isolating an elderly parent is caring for them, that's not love. When someone suggests that confusion and illness only happen during their visits, that's not coincidence. When family members who've been close for decades suddenly turn cruel, that's not natural aging or personality changes. That's manipulation, and recognizing it isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. To the grandmothers being told they're losing their minds, trust yourself. To the sons and daughters being turned against their parents, question sudden changes. To the teenagers who sense something's wrong, speak up. To the families already trapped, it's not too late. Evidence can be gathered. Help is available. Justice is possible. As I finish writing this story, it's Christmas Eve again. Tomorrow, our family will gather once more. David will sit in his chair, clear-eyed and grateful. Emma will be home from college, eager to share what she's learned. Thomas will have grown another 2 inches, his voice deeper but his heart still tender. Sarah will join us for her second Christmas as David's wife, pregnant with their first child together. My future grandchild, who will grow up in a family that knows how to protect itself. Jennifer will be there too, with her new partner Mark, because family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about showing up, fighting for each other, and refusing to let anyone tear you apart. Dorothy will join us via video call from Colorado, where she's spending the holiday with Harold's childhood friend who helped her through the darkest time of her life. Well, raise our glasses to survival, to justice, to the families we've helped and the ones still fighting. Well, remember that Christmas 4 years ago when everything fell apart, and well, marvel at how much stronger we've become. But most of all, well, simply be together. No drugs in the coffee, no hidden recordings necessary, no fear that someone is documenting our confusion for nefarious purposes. Just a family that faced evil, survived it, and chose to use that survival to protect others. That's the ultimate victory over predators like Brittany, Franklin, and Patricia. They tried to destroy us, but instead, they created an army of advocates. They tried to silence us, but instead, they gave us a platform. They tried to steal our family, but instead, they taught us just how precious and powerful real family can be. So here's my message to anyone reading this. Sitting at your own table this Christmas, wondering if something feels wrong in your family. Trust that feeling. Look closer. Ask questions. Protect your vulnerable loved ones. And remember that pushing someone down, whether physically or emotionally, is never an act of love. Love lifts you up, love includes you. Love fights for you, not against you. And sometimes, love means standing up after you've been pushed down, gathering evidence, building alliances, and making sure the person who pushed you never gets the chance to push anyone else again. That's what family does. That's what love is. That's how we win. To everyone listening to this story, I want to ask you, have you noticed any warning signs in your own family or in families around you? What would you do if you discovered someone you loved was being manipulated? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you or might help someone you know, please like and share it. Consider subscribing to hear more stories of family resilience and survival. Together, we can protect our families and expose those who would prey upon them. Thank you for listening to my story. And may your own families be blessed with the kind of love that protects, the kind of trust that's earned, and the kind of bonds that no con artist can break.